South Alabama's top 5 position battles with AL.com's Creg Stephenson. It's Locked On Sunbelt.
You are Locked On Sunbelt, your daily podcast on the Sunbelt Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz, and as promised, thank goodness, we do have AL.com beat writer for South Alabama, Creg Stephenson, going over his article from last week about the top 5 position battles. It's really 4 position battles, and the 5th one has too many players. So it'll be interesting to see how they work things out at safety. But we talk about expectations. We talk about, getting the depth chart set, maybe heading into fall. Usually that is not the case. And how Carter Bradley, and this is really a big one as well, how he can take it to the next level. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get to it. It is Locked On Sunbelt with AL.com's Creg Stephenson, South Alabama's top 5 position battles. Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. I'm your host, Dave Schultz. Thrilled and honored to have on Creg Stephenson. He is the South Alabama beat writer for AL.com, co-hosts the Randy Kennedy Show on 99.5 in the afternoons here in Mobile. South Alabama has had 2 practices so far. First of all, spring practices. I do find it odd, Craig, that some of these teams, Georgia State's already done. They were done at the beginning of March before South Alabama had even started. It's very odd on how these teams go about scheduling spring ball.
Yeah, I think part of it has to do with weather. You don't want to start too early or you get in bad weather, although in Atlanta you would think the weather's worse than it is here. Also, though, I think the idea is that you want to get done as soon as you possibly can. So if anybody's injured, it gives them more time to recover. And then you want to, if you got a spring game, you got to kind of schedule that around Easter and spring break and all that sort of thing too. So there's a little bit of calculus that goes into it. But yeah, it is strange. I know Duke has always started really, or at least when Cutcliffe was there, they always started super early. They were done before just about anybody else started. But anyway, like you said, most everybody is either been going a week or 2 or is starting pretty soon. And, most of the spring games are April 8th, 15th, and 22nd. South Alabama's case, it is the April the 15th.
All right, so this is a different thing that it's been for South Alabama. The coach is here for a 3rd straight season, Kane Womack, and they don't have a quarterback competition for the first time. Right. I think you said in recent history. Do we know the last time they had a returning starting quarterback?
It was before I was covering them. So I think 2014 maybe was the last time they had a returning starting quarterback. That's not 100% true. Desmond Trotter was the returning starter. I guess Steve Campbell's last year. He had started the last 3 games of the previous season, but there was still competition in the spring and the fall with Chance Lovertich, who came in, the junior college transfer, and actually ended up starting a couple games that year. Trotter, I think, missed a game due to COVID and missed a couple of games due to injury. So, but in terms of an unquestioned starting quarterback who it would take a major catastrophe for him to not be the starter, this is kind of new territory for South Alabama in the last several years with Carter Bradley coming back after setting virtually every important single-season record at South Alabama, which Jake Bentley had set most of the previous year. So it's kind of a new era for sure at South Alabama.
And then in this era of the transfer portal, they had their backup QB going into the portal, and he decided to come back.
Yeah, Desmond Trotter, as we talked about before, you kind of feel bad for the guy. He lost the starting job 2 years in a row to 2 different quarterbacks and had 1 more year to play, so he figured he would go in the portal and see what he could find. And I think he talked to a couple of places, but maybe wasn't able to find somewhere that he would feel comfortable going in trying to compete for the job. So he stayed at South Alabama, and yeah, he's a really valuable backup. We've seen particularly 2 years ago when Jake Bentley got hurt, to have him available was really big for them. And, if he had not stayed, then you would have been 1 play away with Carter Bradley of starting somebody that had never really played at all, either that being Tanner McGee, who's I guess his 3rd or 4th year in the program, but has never really played an important snap at quarterback, and then the true freshman Gio Lopez, who has got 2 practices under his belt.
Right, and Desmond had a big ball game. Only like a possession or 2 against Southern Miss, and actually led them to a field goal in a big road victory. It is Locked On Sunbelt. Dave Schultz along with AL.com beat writer Creg Stephenson for South Alabama. All right, you wrote last week about the 5 position battles that we are watching because did you also write that they have 20 returning starters, including a couple of guys that were injured? I mean, that is an outrageous number in this day and age to have 20 returning starters coming back.
No question about it. I mean, and it depends. The math is kind of squirrely, but they have 18 guys who started in the bowl game that are back. Actually, 9 on offense, 9 on defense. 3 guys graduated. It's funny you can mention all the departed starters and not really waste any time because it was Jalen Wayne at wide receiver, James Jackson at center, Darrell Luter at corner, and C.J. Rice at outside linebacker. And Rice is all the other 3 were all 5th or 6th year seniors. Rice went in the transfer portal, and he's at McNeese State now. But everybody else is back. Plus, as you mentioned, Keith Gallman and Quentin Wilfon, who were 2 starters the previous season. Gallman missed the entire year. Wilfon got hurt, I think, against UCLA in week 3 and missed the rest of the year. So they're back. So, if you add it up that way, it's 20 returning starters, which is really amazing, like you said. And it's certainly unprecedented here at South Alabama to have that much returning talent. And, you're right. I did write about the position battles, but that's basically it. It's not like these are the 5 most interesting. It's like these are the 5 only ones that are going on. And, one of those is that outside linebacker position where Rice graduated. But it's going to be really weird this spring because Wilfon's still coming off surgery. A couple other guys are hurt. And at that position in the spring, they're going to be playing a bunch of walk-ons. So I don't know that that's really going to be settled much this spring. Center sounds like it is pretty well, at least to start out with, is taken care of. Reggie Smith has moved over from right guard to center. Reed Bias, who's a guy that came in from Mississippi State, will compete there, and as well as at right guard where they've got James Robinson, who was a Tennessee transfer last year, and then Reed Gavins, a guy that's been in the program a couple of years. I think it's kind of Reggie Smith's job to lose. Former walk-on, kind of an undersized guy, but they really like him, one of the smartest guys on the team, and should be able to step right in at that leadership. The offensive cornerback, they lost the top 3 actually from last year. Luter, as we mentioned, one of the better defensive players in the program's history, and then Jamar Richardson, who was probably the 3rd corner, 2nd corner, depending on what time of year it was. He had some injury issues as well. But they do have Marquise Robinson back, Ricky Fletcher, who was a freshman last year, but one guy to really keep an eye on is Reggie Neely, who's a junior college transfer. I think one of the top 20 junior college transfers in the country, according to 24/7 Sports. So he's going to have a real shot to come in and want to start a really, really good East Mississippi Community College program. And then at safety, it's not really they've got to replace guys. They've got to find room for everybody because you've got Gallman coming back, and you already have 3 starters back. You have Yam Banks at the Husky nickel spot where he was all Sun Belt last year. Jaden Boyson, who kind of stepped into that Gallman void last year and really became the leader of the secondary, and then Jalen Jordan, the transfer from Ole Miss, who moved into that starting job when Gallman got hurt. So they like all of these guys, and it's just going to be a matter of time for all of them. Receiver is the other position where Jalen Wayne, who's a 3-year starter, is gone. They have the 2 of the top 3 back in Devin Boyson and Colin Lacey. They played 3 receivers most. And so it's going to be a matter of finding out who that 3rd guy is. They brought in a Memphis transfer, Javon Ivory, who I think is a little banged up this spring. Then Shamar Sandgren, a really productive junior college receiver, and then a bunch of guys that were already here. J. Jawan Townsend, Jeremiah Webb, Jamal Pritchett is a guy that played late in the year. Actually, the second half of the bowl game when Jalen Wayne got hurt, he's a walk-on. Formerly played at Tuskegee, but they really like the guy. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a lot of playing time as well.
All right, let's take a time out. We'll be right back with more with Creg Stephenson. South Alabama has a chance to really build out their depth chart even before the season and maybe fall practice begins. But first, let's talk to you a little bit about Built. I got mine. I did. I went back and got some more. And and I've lost all the weight that I put on at home with Mama Schultz's cooking, and a big help from Built. The Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now is your time to make a count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. You know I'll be voting for the churro bar. Yes, I certainly will. Or actually, the churro puff. And if you want the churro puff to win, then you'll be voting for that bar too. Support your team, support your bar or puff. And when you vote for your favorite bar or puff, you'll be entered in a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. Built, the best protein bar ever. Seriously, they're so amazing you won't think they're good for you. What makes Built bars and puffs so good? Well, for starters, they're all high in protein, low in sugar, and covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. Run to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop on in and support your pick. All right, let's get back to it. Dave Schultz, Locked On Sunbelt, Creg Stephenson from AL.com, talking about the depth that South Alabama has heading into the 2023 season. With just the 5 spots that they're looking to fill, and one of them is actually they have too many players at safety, it feels like the springtime is a really good chance for Kane Womack and company to figure out what their depth is, like who could be ready to play if somebody gets hurt, and not necessarily waiting until the fall unless they get, a Braylon McReynolds in there freshman-wise that's going to make a big splash. It feels like, and it's impressive for any team, but especially South Alabama, they could have almost a set 2 deep come, the beginning of August.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, quarterback Gio Lopez, who we mentioned a minute ago, he's the only true freshman that is here in the spring. And it would take a lot for him to get on the field in the fall, other than maybe in a, 2 or 3 game situation where they could still redshirt him. I do think that there are some younger guys on the defensive side of the ball. James Miller, who's the starting inside linebacker, is also going to miss most of the spring due to injury. So that's going to give a couple of guys, Khalil Jacobs and Blaine Myrick, who were freshmen last year, to get a chance to really, get some solid reps. I think they really think that Jacobs is probably the next really good inside linebacker in this program. So it's going to give him real opportunity. They do have some young corners. They have a couple of younger offensive linemen, but it's going to be tough to crack that 2 deep. The running back position is the one that's really intriguing to me because they brought back 3 of the top 4 from last year. Omni Wells, the Mississippi State transfer, was the only one who's gone, but you brought back LaDamian Webb. You brought back Braylon McReynolds, who's probably the next, starter at that position. You got Marco Lee for another year, who is a kind of a short yardage guy. And then they brought in a transfer from Ole Miss, Kentrell Bullock. So D1 transfer. He didn't come here to not play. Then they signed 2 freshmen, Jarvis Durr, who's from Mississippi, and then PJ Martin, who's an all-state guy from the New Orleans area, who I think led the entire state of Louisiana in rushing last year. So they're going to have a real wealth at running back, and it's there's only one football. I don't know how many of those guys are going to play next year. You hope it doesn't lead to a situation where somebody transfers out. But, LaDamian Webb showed last year that he can carry the ball 25 or 30 times a game if they really need him to. And he was the best guy they had. But McReynolds will definitely have a role, whether it's just, in special teams, catching the ball out of the backfield. He's about the best they have at that.
All right, it's Locked On Sunbelt, your team every day. We're talking with Creg Stephenson, AL.com beat writer for South Alabama and co-host of the Randy Kennedy Show, 99.5 here in Mobile. All right, let's talk about the wide receivers. I did ask Kane Womack about, do you move Colin Lacey or Devin Voisin into the Jalen Wayne spot, or do you let somebody, because they were so good at what they did, or do you have one of those receivers that you mentioned moving to the Jalen Wayne spot? And typical, I don't know if it's typical coach speak. He's like, well, we move guys around all the time. So I guess there's not one X guy and one Y guy or something along those lines. What do you think is going to happen? Because Devin Voisin was really hard to stop in the slot.
No question. I thought by the end of the year, he was probably the best receiver on the team. And that's no knock against Jalen Wayne, who's going to have a chance to play in the NFL. And Colin Lacey, who was really, really productive as well. I think actually led the team in receiving, at least in receptions last year. But, Yeah, the positions are really fluid. I don't really pay attention to who's the X and who's the Y and who's the slot and all that kind of stuff because they do move them around. I think they cross-train those guys, at least the veteran guys at different positions. I will say this, if they're in the personnel where they have 2 receivers on the field and 2 tight ends or whatever, 2 running backs maybe, it's going to be Voisin and Lacey most of the time, I would guess. Sure. I think they really do like Javon Ivory, though. He caught almost 100 passes in 3 years at Memphis, so he's definitely going to have a role there. Sangren also, I would be shocked if he didn't get on the field in a really meaningful way. But at the tight end position, I mean, DJ Thomas-Jones showed that he could be a real weapon in the passing game. Crum and Lincoln Sefcik are kind of more classic tight ends, but it could be a situation where they have 3 wide receivers and DJ Thomas-Jones is one of the 3, even though he's technically a tight end.
All right, so let's talk about Carter Bradley. What do you think he needs to do to take his game to the next level? Quarterback.
Yeah, he has such a strong arm, and with guys that have that strong an arm, they tend to force the ball sometimes. He threw some bad interceptions at times last year, or would have a guy open and throw it 1,000 miles an hour, and it would be incomplete because the guy just couldn't catch it. Right. He overthrew a couple of big, potential big plays last year, including one against Troy, where he had Devin Voisin wide open, probably would have been a touchdown, but he overthrew him. So I think it's just a matter of working on touch a little bit. He's got all the other skills. He can run enough. He's never really going to be a guy that's going to, break off a 30-yard run out of the read option. But if he's under pressure and he needs 2 yards, he can pick it up, that sort of thing. So I think it's just a matter of refining the touch on his passes from time to time, because he's got what looks like an NFL arm to me. I'm not saying he's going to be an NFL starter, but he can throw the ball for sure.
You said one of the interesting positions in the spring is the outside linebacker because everybody's banged up. One of the things that King Womack said, following the season is that they needed to get better at rushing the quarterback and getting plays for loss and creating turnovers. Where do we think that's coming from this year?
It looks like Quentin Wilfon's going to be the guy that gets first crack at that. He was an inside linebacker, has been an inside linebacker, but they're going to move him to that, what they call the wolf outside linebacker position, where sometimes you're standing up and sometimes you got your hand on the ground. They really haven't liked the production there the last couple of years. It's really been several years, even going back to Womack's first tenure here, since they had a real dominant pass rusher. Jamie Sheriff, who plays defensive end, I think has had some good moments. Brock Higdon, they like what he can do a little bit in situations. But as far as having that one guy that the other team has to account for on every passing down, they haven't had that probably since Randy Allen back in 2016 when Womack was here the first time as defensive coordinator. So developing that guy, whether it's Wilfon, whether it's one of the other guys that's already on the team, or, there's going to be another round of Division I transfers after the spring. So maybe they'll find somebody in that if they don't like what they're getting in the spring.
All right, let's take one more time out. We'll be back more with Creg Stephenson from AL.com talking about these expectations that could be very, very high for South Alabama, something this program has really hadn't dealt with yet. But first, let me tell you about FanDuel. It's the midway point of the NBA season, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything, from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, let's go back to Creg Stephenson for one more segment, Locked On Sunbelt, talking about these expectations because the schedule is kind of front-loaded. And if South Alabama, God forbid, beats Tulane and Oklahoma State, it could be one of those really special seasons for the Jags. All right, we both brought this up. I talked about it earlier last week, And, the expectations are going to be high. I'd be shocked if South Alabama is not picked to win the Sun Belt. We expect Troy to be good, but they got a lot of guys to replace. Their quarterback can be inconsistent. They got to replace Carlton Martial and some other guys on defense. We'll see how Coastal Carolina is. Grayson McCall is coming back for now. I presume Marshall will be pretty good. Southern Miss is building something. We'll see what happens with the Cajuns. But overall, I would tend to think that South Alabama is going to be picked to win the Sun Belt. And again, it probably a little bit lofty, but they're going to Tulane. Somehow Tulane South Alabama may be a trap game because they got Ole Miss the next day or the next week. And then they go to Oklahoma State, which, again, a Power 5 is going to be tough. But they went out to L.A. and, could have beaten UCLA. The expectations for the first time and maybe ever are going to be really high in Mobile for South Alabama.
No question. They won't sneak up on anybody this year. They will be I'm with you. I think they're going to be at least picked to win the West. Troy did lose a lot of frontline talent. John Summerall's a good coach. I think he showed that last year. Right. They lost some really, really key guys. Carlton Martial being number one, but some of the offensive linemen as well. Jake Andrews, Austin Stidham. Those were guys that were real key contributors. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they lost some of those guys as well. And then everybody else in the West is really still in the building stages. Southern Miss is on the way up. I think Louisiana showed later in the year that they seem to be, heading in the right direction. And then on the East side, Coastal, new coach. So you don't know what you're going to expect there. You don't know if McCall's going to be back. You presume Marshall and James Madison will be good again, but who knows? I wouldn't be surprised if they were picked to win the Sun Belt with 18 or 20 starters, however you count it, coming back and coming off a 10-win season. It's really interesting the way the schedule sets up. Like you said, they've got in the first 3 weeks, Tulane and Oklahoma State. I mean, and if they can go out to UCLA and throw a scare into them, there's no reason with the way Oklahoma State's offseason has gone, new coordinators, a lot of guys lost to the transfer portal, and not a great season last year. I mean, potentially they could win there, but if you beat Tulane, which will probably be a preseason top 25 team, you're either going to be ranked or on the verge of being ranked early in the year. So this team has never had to deal with those kind of expectations. Even the guys that transferred from other programs most of them were not starters at those programs. So even if they went to places that were used to going to bowl games and used to playing in big games, it hasn't been all on their shoulders.
All right, let's wrap it up here with Creg Stephenson, Locked On Sunbelt. Your team every day covers South Alabama for AL.com. All right, how do you go about covering the team? I go in there. We want to, talk to the new players and talk to the old players and get an idea of how we, deal with, year number 3. How do you go about covering this team on a daily basis? Because one of my first places I look on Twitter, see what Craig wrote, see if I missed anything. How do you go about finding out things and covering the squad?
Yeah, I've been around long enough to where I know not just the guys on the current team and the current coaching staff, but a lot of the guys that have been there in the building, so to speak, or around the building for a long time. And so sometimes you get tipped off about things from those people. But I will say this: Kane Womack and his staff, it is one of the more media friendly environments I've ever been around. I mean, you can probably count on one hand the number of programs in the country where every single practice is completely open to the media. You can watch every single minute of it if you want to. Now, I don't always want to, and I don't see every minute of it.
Right. It's a good and bad thing, as it turns out.
Right, yeah. But if you want to, you can do it. So that makes that part of it, pretty easy and refreshing. There are other programs too that are that way, but it's definitely easier than covering some of the from some of the SEC schools, for example, where it's like trying to get information out of the Kremlin at times.
At the same time, though, we're it. I mean, it's you, me, and Tommy Hicks. We're it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, sometimes that's good, though. You don't have to worry about getting beat a whole lot.
No, I mean, Yeah, that's for sure. By the time I hear a rumor, it's, everybody else knows it by the time I hear anything. All right, you got anything planned for this week coming up for South Alabama? It is the first full week. They practice Friday, practice Saturday, and then they practice, I guess, is it Monday, Wednesday, Friday? What is it?
No, okay. There are 2 in the book. Yeah, they're going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday for the next 3 weeks. Is that 3 weeks? No, 4 weeks, and then the spring game, which would be on a Saturday. So they'll be Monday, Wednesday, Friday from here on out. I think the first scrimmage is the 31st. I think I'm right when I say that. Yeah, something like that. All right. Anyway, so they'll have 2 scrimmages and then the spring game. So yeah, I'll go out there Monday. I still got a Reggie Smith feature that I got to write. He was, like I mentioned, moving from right guard to center. So I'll probably write that and have it on the site sometime tomorrow.
When's the story on the 30-year-old punter coming out?
And wait until it turns 30. Jack's not here. The other day, Jack Brooks, who, it is more common than you think it is with these guys that come out of that Australian program. A lot of them play, amateur rugby. And Jack, when he first got here, I actually wrote about him, Jack Brooks, and he actually was a landscaper for a couple of years before he decided he wanted to, get involved in this Kick Australia program, I think is what it's called, and wound up over here. So, yeah, he got here, he was 24, and because of the extra year due to COVID, he will be a 30-year-old, 5th-year senior this fall, which is pretty cool. He's a great guy, too. I really love getting around with him. And I asked him the other day when he turns 30. I think he said July sometime. So he will be a 30-year-old college football player in 2023.
He is Creg Stephenson, AL.com, South Alabama beat writer, and co-host of the Randy Kennedy Show, 99.5 here in Mobile. We will see you out at South Alabama practice. Thanks, Creg.
All right, Dave.